really means for him as a man regarding marriage and our relationship with God. So God loved me even before I was conceived. That's the truth. So when I eventually then became a human on earth, he continued to love me with all of my shortcomings. So really, for any man, for any husband, it's a lot. It's a big shoe to fill. That's what God has declared that they should do, and so that's what's expected of them. All right, so over to you, Pastor Emmanuel Daniel, my darling husband. All right.
Thank you so much. I think I've been feeding my time, waiting for the day that my coffee, my corner is going to invite me to speak because I've been listening to different speakers. So, yay! Finally, I get that. Yeah, so I'm at the forefront of it. But yes, again, wherever you are, I think when my wife had reached out to me about this particular series and the topic for it, there are two things that jumped at me. One was the fact that God had spoken to us about how, this was a year of the Rehoboth, meaning that God is going to make room for you. And also just understanding the seasons that we're in particular. But I think specifically, it's even the topic in itself and how, we rub off each other, the way God rubs off on us. And I think it's important to see the parallel of how one works. Marriage, I think I have seen, it's so easy it's so easy for you to cancel people. For instance, if you're not married, I always say that when a pastor is not married or a leader is not married, canceling a marriage is, let's wait till he gets married and see how well he will do when when he deals with the day-to-day situations that come with marriage. And I think in my case, it was looking back, dating for about 8 years, during that particular period of our lives, and then by the time we got married, I think for me personally, I think one of the key things that have always been is just the ability for me to be able to treat as raised my home to always respect women. Something that my father just sort of put in us, that make sure that you respect women. So the idea of shouting at a woman was just not something I saw growing up. Beating up a woman was just something. And many times I remember that I had a kid sister about 4 years younger than I am. And I recall that I used to get beaten a lot, even for things that she did, things that I didn't do, even when things have gone wrong. But, I just found that I got the broncos of whatever it was that went on after. But the idea was I couldn't express myself in the sense that I couldn't hit her. I couldn't, because that was the way I was raised. So, of course, growing up, my interactions with females has always been, just making sure that you respect women, you treat them with the utmost respect, kindness, and the delicate nature. And then, of course, I met my lovely wife. Many of you perhaps have heard some of the stories, but just for the sake of, for those who haven't heard how we met, we always tell, there's a point of the story where we always take different sides, where she says, it's my part of the story is the true story. So just believe my story because it's a true story. I remember, and again, and it's important. I'm being, one of these meetings that we have like this and these talks. And I think one of the things I love about my coffee, my corner is that you have conversations that are real, open, and you're vulnerable about it. Because we have found with our journey with God that vulnerability really is strength. It's not weakness, strength. And so things that we hold back and we can't share does not just the kingdom in the way the kingdom. So I was, and I always say this, I wasn't one of those who I didn't pray for a while. The way people say that, they're praying for once. I wasn't in that space praying for a while because I wasn't even thinking that marriage wasn't even anything in my books. marriage for me was not, you know, and I'll give reasons why. I haven't watched my family watch my, my father and my mother live through uh, raising us as kids, raising us with the values that they did. Only at the point where I was a teenager, I started hearing things about the fact that there was a disagreement between them, and
Oh, I hear your voice. Can you hear him properly?
it's echoing.
It's going in and out. It's not like very clear.
Okay, let's.
Can hear you clearly now.
You can hear me now. Is it better?
It's clearer now. Okay, so I guess you can go on.
All right. Okay, so I was just saying that, growing up at home, watching how we were raised in the family, we were very close knit as a family. And at the time, I think I was probably 16, 17 in my life when, we I think we had within the space of maybe about 4 or 5 years, we had three major robbery attacks in our home. And it just seemed like something that was, quite traumatic at the time. And I think the last time it happened, my father literally got my younger sister, my mother, to stay somewhere else just because he said he wasn't moving from the neighborhood. He was going to stay there. So just so that they can integrate back properly. But I stayed with my father during this. Um, so that's what I know as in terms of, I knew my mother was somewhere, my father was somewhere, but I think within that period, there were things that were going on between them that just we didn't know. But eventually found out that, they got to the point where they decided that they wanted to divorce each other. And for me, that was very, I'll tell you why it was troubling for me, was simply because I recall that they were so angry. Both of them were so angry, so bitter, that I could literally tell my mom I was going to my father and she wouldn't check because she wasn't talking. And I was a teenager. So try and imagine what I could possibly have gotten into at that time. Nobody knows, right? And so for me, watching and experiencing that wasn't an experience that I thought was ideal to experience as a teenage boy. And so I just decided as I grew older that if this was what it was going to be, that I would get married and somewhere along the line, both of us are going to break up and then put my kids in this particular situation. Then marriage was not something that was, So I just decided that, I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to leave marriage alone and just live my life. In fact, my life was designed in such a way that I was going to have, I'm just going to make money, good life, have proper, loan in my house, and just of life, and of course, and that was the trajectory of my life. I lived, had until this particular day I left, and I was going to. I called a friend of mine, some girl who you had known for a bit, and that day just felt like the right day. I thought I was gonna, reach out to her, called her up and said to her that I'd like to come visit her. Of course, what I was going to do to visit her, it was a break period of time at work, but I drove all the way from Victoria Island, and I drove straight to uh, Sule. And the truth, in all, openness and sincerity, I was literally going to sleep with her. That was what I was going to do. Just have sex and then go back to work. But of course, at that time, um, I had the the mobile phone that you had, the 090 mobile phone that had the big, huge Motorola phone in the car. And because many people didn't have mobile phones at the time, so you could call from home, you could literally just call home, the house. By the time I got there, the security said she had stepped out briefly. So she wasn't home. So in the bid to try and find what I would do, how I'm going to spend my time, while I was there, I thought, okay, let me really go grab something to eat. I made a turn and I was heading out. And as I was driving, I looked and I saw this lady, this young lady, who was now my wife, like, oh my, she, in everything that you want, to have in a woman, as in, at the time, I wanted people I had the thing for short hair, but she was just there, short dress, short hair, long legs, and I was looking at her across, and I was saying to myself, "Oh my goodness!" And I was so engrossed with that view that I decided that, you know what, she's on that side of the road. So I parked the car since I didn't have anything to do. I was still trying to figure out what to do. I was still trying to figure out where. So I just parked my car, just watching her and seeing what it was she was doing. So I noticed she crossed over to the other side where my car was. And apparently our car was parked right behind where I parked. So she got into the car and I thought, okay. And then she got out of the car and crossed over again. I said, okay, whoever this person is, since I don't even have any agenda for now, I was just going to wait and sit down here. But yes, the legs, beautiful legs, beautiful looks, absolutely. All of those things put together was like a wow for me. And so I waited and I parked at that point. I said, well, since I know this is her, whatever she's doing, I'll wait for her to come back. I have all the time in the world, right? Giving that. Of course, she came out. And as soon as she came, she crossed over, got in her car and drove, and immediately I pulled up behind her. Now, there was no other way I would have been able to do it. I determined that I'm just going to follow her and figure out how I can get her to pull over somewhere and get her to talk. So I drove right behind her. Yeah. Yeah, I drove right behind her. And as I was driving behind her, of course, a friend of hers that she was in the car with her, I'd known her because she kept looking backwards. And so I waved. Exactly. Okay, I waved. You can call it whatever you want to do at this point in time. But this is where it got me. So I waved to let them know, to signify that I am following you, because I wanted them to know it wasn't just I wanted them to know. So of course, I mean, flashing. Yeah. So I think my wife was, at some point, I think they were concerned and decided to pull over to try and get themselves. My goal was to follow wherever she's going. I was ready to go in there. I got to her house. I was ready to get to the house and introduce myself to her father and tell the father why. That's how determined. So they pulled up of thinking that I was going to drive away.
Sorry, it seems like the volume keeps going in and out.
It's clear from this side.
Is it from where? Is it from my own end?
We can hear. We can
hear PD loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic. Okay.
Maybe you need to log out and come back in.
All right. So of course, she pulled up, and I just, how the Miami Vice would do. You just, how they just cross your car, or cops just cross your car. So that was what I did. I really just aimed her in. So there's no way she could drive away from where I came down. I remember saying to her, and I remember saying all the time, and she knows, that I came out of that. The way I came out of my car, thought I was Miami Vice. Came out looking. I knew, I was looking very fly, all well dressed, proper suit, all of that. Came out just feeling the vibe, that she was feeling my vibe. You won't say that. But I walked over to her and I introduced myself to her. And of course, I told her why, I needed to engage, and, in the exchange of pleasantries, and that's where the argument is. She said she didn't give me a phone number. It was a friend that gave me a phone number. But all I know is I got the phone number from her. And that's what that matters. And from that point onwards, and that's the story I want you guys to believe, that she gave me a phone number, right? And from that point onwards, of course, I started to do my thing, just make sure that I followed up with her, kept in touch with her. I recall that in the early days of my chatting with her, it was quite an unusual, I remember that I'd sit with her and talk. She would just be looking at me, smiling, grinning, and occasionally goes, "Oh, yeah, right." So I would do talking, like, 2-3 hours or 4 hours of nonstop, just talking. So every day I drive to her house, I have to remind myself of what I said yesterday, so that I don't say anything that is contrary to what I said, because the talk is long. So you can imagine the homework every day that you engage. But anyhow, this was the journey of how we got into this. Cut the long story short, and we dated for 8 years. And I want to say that there were in all of those times, it wasn't like there were anything major that was out of it. We didn't have fights. We didn't have we could disagree on things, but we didn't have a fight. I never heard a voice beyond the tone that she had from the moment I've known her. Very soft spoken, very easy, and then we got into marriage. And the journey began, marriage, which, I would always say that first stage when you enter this, it's called the honeymoon stage. The honeymoon stage is where you still have all the butterflies, all of those things, in marriage, the expectations that you have in marriage, how you want, this idea of all of these things. And of course, it was there in the process of us, living through. But all of a sudden, right deep inside the marriage itself, I think the first year there were just a few challenges we started having. We started having quarrels, we started having disagreements. But I think the thing that shook me the most was, for someone who you've known for 8 years and you've never sort of seen her express herself in a way that our voice is beyond the normal voice. The first time that, she reacted in a way that our voice was above that, I was in shock. It was like my spirit left my body. That kind of shock that holds you, asking yourself, like, no, this can't be true. But this was a woman that was upset, really upset, and I didn't understand it. And for me, that bothered me a lot. Right? That bothered me a lot because I just didn't know how to.
Morning, I was to share something else, but the Lord told me you are going to talk about Lord's Prayer.
I didn't know how to deal with that. Please
mute everyone?
Yeah. I didn't know how to deal with that, but it just felt like I was, like every man will feel, I was disrespected in the tone and in the way that it was spoken. And I just didn't like it. It grieved me. It grieved my spirit. And anybody who knows me, I don't like fights. I don't like competition. I don't like things like that. I like being able to just have it, very where we could all just live in peace and be joyful, in whatever it is that we're doing. So this became the first assignment. And so the question now was, how do I deal with a situation like this? Now, I've never seen my father, shout, never seen none of those things in the time. Maybe by the time they started to get the divorce, of course, they were bitter. There was a lot of exchanges at that point in time. But all growing up, I didn't know how that was dealt with. And so it was a struggle for me. So, of course, at that time, and let me say this, I think I did probably mention this in the early stages, but I met her, like I said, I wasn't praying for a wife, just so you know how good God is, how God is deliberate about your life, is that I didn't even know that I was going to ever be a priest in my life. The life I was living prior to the time that I met her, there's nothing that could relate me to being a priest of others. Nothing whatsoever. And because I wasn't even thinking of getting married, marriage was not something on the table. I just wanted to live my life and just leave. But there were so many things that began to bring this. But the key is the fact that, number one, even though I was going to do something that wasn't right, God used that to take me to where I needed to be, which says that all things work together for good in the way God works. But more importantly was that she was very, in terms of her faith, she was very, at that age, she was very built. She was built. She knew what she wanted in Christ. I was far from it. But literally, my relationship with her, in dating her, was what brought me into Christ. She literally prayed me into her life, the way she molded her life, and the fact that there were just things around her. And I think that was for me, it was just a God factor. That's just a God factor. And for me, that was important. And that drew me to God. So I'm saying this because by the time I was now being married, of course, I've become very plugged into God. All the time we were dating, vigils, going to the Redeem camp. She made me go to Redeem camp for the first time ever. But when I think about all of those things, they built and brought to me today, is the man that I am today is from that interaction, how we started to rub off on each other. She started to rub off on me even earlier before we got married. And for me, what it did was that in getting into marriage, I was already now fully God. And that helped because I had to turn to God to ask God how I was going to deal with this situation. How am I going to deal with a woman who, when she gets angry, this is just, the whole house goes, you know. And so I turned to God and I started praying. And I started praying, I started asking God, like, God, what do I do? How do I do this? Somewhere down the line, because the human flesh, you ask yourself, you probably be thinking that God is just going to say, shout at her, tell her to shut up, or just put her in the room, lock her up in the door, and just lock her in there, or just smack her give her just one hot smack, that she will just correct herself. In your mind somewhere, because that's where your flesh is so wounded, you're thinking that that's what God might say. But I remember the first time God responded. He didn't even respond to the prayer when I was praying. I was asking for something totally different, something that had to do with the job and the contract that I was praying about. And I heard him say to me very softly, very gently, he says, you want me to tell you what to do with your wife? And I said, yes. But even though that's not what I'm asking, but I said, yes. I wanted to know how to go forward. And then he asked me a very simple question. He says, who is the leader of the home? I said, me. Okay, so you're the one who leads. I mean, that line of question was making me feel excited because it was making me feel like, yes, since you're the man of the house, you know how to discipline her. So that was where I thought he was going. And then he asked me a simple question: how do leaders lead? I says they lead by example. Okay, all right. What does that mean? It means that I needed to lead by example in my. In other words, whatever it is that I did not want to see her do, I need to model it. If I'm angry, I need to model how not to express myself in a way. I needed to be that. And while that was going on in the fourth month, God was sharing that with me, and I started to walk in that. Okay, I'm going to start to model what that looks like, what being a leader. In other words, what I do not want to see in my home, I want to be able to model it. And for so many of you who are here, or maybe men who might be listening, what you model as a man, the woman becomes. What the woman becomes, the children become. And so your actions have a way of affecting and impacting the kids, or you set the tone of how your home is going to look. And so that was precisely what that we did in just being in that place where we literally, I started to say to myself, I needed to lead, for example. What did that look like? One of the examples God gave to me was very earlier. It says in your home at the time, we didn't have kids. It was just my wife and I. We had a chef in the house. We had steward who cleaned the house. We had a driver. We had security guys. And so he was saying to me, he was giving me an example of what it looks like in terms of leadership. He says the most important person in your home, the number one citizen in your home is your wife. The next person are your children. And then the next are the people who care for the children. And then the next are the people who care for the house. And the next, it goes all down. And the seventh person on that list was me. And what he was saying essentially is that once you start this journey, when you get home from work, first thing that you do is that you ask, has everybody eaten? Your wife will say, okay. Your children are okay. Their nanny is okay. The cook is okay. The driver is okay. The security is okay before you eat. So that was the kind of leadership that Jesus wanted us to model, wanted me to model. And that required me understanding that I needed to die. Without him saying to me, I want you to die. You know the way it comes at you, die first, you deny yourself. That just sounds very strong. But that was a subtle way of saying, you have to lead, for example. What you do not want to see in your house, you need to be able to model it. So what then happened in our journey was that it became, for me, very clear that she was the most important. Now, many people never understood why. From that point onwards, if I was driving in the car with my wife, typically everyone who drives, the way it is in Nigeria, is that the husband sits, at the right hand behind the passenger seat, and the wife sits right behind the driver. But no, for me, it was different. If she's the most important person there, she sits on that seat, and I sit on the seat that is behind. And you could argue it out to say the person who sits on that seat needs a longer leg room. But that's not the point. The point is, I need to ensure that my wife is comfortable at all times. That is at comfort, that is at best. And for me, that was how to model, to ensure that if I model what it looked like to ensure that she is priority and she's number one, and she must be comfortable first, we model the same thing with our children. The children will model the same thing with relatives wherever they are. And so that's how we live. If we go for a function, for instance, it's the usual traditional thing for a man to sit down, and of course the wife will go take a plate and you collect the food, you get served, and then you bring the food for your husband and you go back in. It was reversed for us. Is that I would go and get the food and bring the food. What am I modeling? Is that she is reverenced, she is respected, she is honored. And so all of these things going out, one of the things I've always found very interesting is women and their bags. Women always carry bags and their bags are always very big. And I wonder what they put inside of that bag. Because sometimes when you carry the bag, you ask yourself, don't you get but I'm saying this because the time when so easily I'm carrying the bag. I carry my wife's bag so easily, But again, it's all trying to make sure that at the end of the day, that she's comfortable. Whatever makes her comfortable. And because of the way that I treat her as my wife, it's also the same way that I am in terms of if I find a woman who is in need, wherever I am, I respond in that particular manner. In fact, as a matter of fact, I always say something that if I don't do this and my wife hears that I was here and I didn't do it, I'm in trouble because she expects me to show that level of example. But I say all of this in our conversation to say that what marriage has done is just us being able to become better. I became more patient. I became more accommodating. For someone who came from, I was known to be quite arrogant before I knew Christ, right? And if anyone who's arrogant, that pride is what fuels arrogance. And pride is actually the father of anger. So whoever has pride would always have anger side by side. But this whole experience, what it's done for me is that it's made me so calm, so peaceful, so accommodating with life, and I see it as how many times in life you go through different stages. I always say that there's a stage where you go into where in marriage, where that's called the honeymoon stage, like I said earlier. That stage is the first 2 years of your relationship with God, and the same thing with God, where with God, when you start a relationship with God, I call it the honeymoon stage, where look, you could ask God for anything, you get it. You don't need to pray in tongues. You could be in the bathroom and just, while you're lying in bed and says, Father, I just want, whatever it is you want, those 2 years, God will just tell you, take it, have it. And then you move from that stage, you go into the reality stage. The reality stage was where we started to, I think, because we've been dating for quite a long time, we jumped into reality stage. So we didn't have like a year. We just jumped into it because because now it was like living together. And that reality stage is different, because the glow starts to fade. The daily life starts to highlight your differences. You might start, bickering more. There's more misunderstanding. So those are the things that we were dealing with at the time. And this is exactly what it's like when you start to get serious with God, that you start seeing that, wait a minute, I thought that, the billboard they put in the beginning was that it's soft life when you come into Christianity, that, it's you just sitting down, sipping pina colada by the beach, and whatever it is you want, you just order, God just gives it to you, like the way you call a genie and it shows up. Then you start realizing that it's different now, right? The things expected. Prayers are not responded to the way you expect them to respond. And then you get to the point where the third stage is the power struggle, where both of you are both strong with specific things, and you're trying to see which one dominates the other. That, in marriage, is a tough season. It's the beginning of the brutal season, because at that point in time, pride is exposing so many things that is inside of you and I, and what you find as common challenges at that point in time is, the control dynamics, feeling stuck. There's resentment beginning to build. There's disconnection already. You're beginning to hear people sound like, sometimes most marriages today don't even get, this is where it ends. This generation that we're in, this point is where it ends. They don't let it, because it's really where all the ugly stuff comes in. And anybody who's gone into marriage and realizes and thinks that marriage is all, no, because there are those moments where you guys won't like each other at all. There are those moments, but what has happened is because I decided very earlier on that I was going to live my life in a way that, how do you put it? It's like you're a rug. They step on you, whatever it is, but you don't react. You make sure your reactions are measured. And that's helped, because if I responded in the way she responded, I'm not sure whether I would probably be here today, because it would only cause more hurt, more wound, more. So if one person is willing to be able to just say, you know what, listen, it's okay. I'm just gonna take it in. But as painful as that might sound, what it's done is made me a better person. It's changed me. It's transformed my life. It's taught me how to be able to hold things down. How to be able to, and I think that this is the stage where many marriages, really struggle. This is the stage where many of us abandon the both of our Christianity and say, this is not working for me. That truly, I remember times when things were easy, but this is that point where sometimes I'm just waiting, I'm trusting God for the fruit of the womb, or I'm trusting God to get married, and it just seems like a lot of things that you thought you understood, you probably you don't, and coasting through this process is how that you can be in terms of posture, making sure that you really lay down yourself. And so from a man, it's always been, how do I give her the best in every situation? How do I ensure that in every situation she gets the best out of it? As far as I'm concerned, as long as she's fine, she's happy, I'm happy. So the joy of it's not what I get, what I want. Oh, you have 2 slices of bread. I must have 2 slices of bread. No. If it's 3 slices of bread and that's all she needs, then she should have it. Because if she's happy, then that should make me happy. And I think that helps us in our journey with how we work with God in general. Because once you can get past that stage of what I call the power struggle stage, you now enter into the stage of, it's called stability stage, where you are now, there's a new kind of peace that comes to that particular marriage. Not because something is different, something because at the end of the day, you are beginning to accept certain things. You're just accepting that, this person's can't change, these flaws, I'm going to accept this, and I'm going to accept this. I'm just going to walk around it. Not that I like it, but guess what? I'm going to learn to live with it. I'm going to learn to, walk through it. And the process of doing so is that I have to love that person enough, that will show, again, in leading by example, how in those instances, how you want them to be able to react differently. And then once you get past that stage, you now go back into the commitment stage where, you're now fully committed to yourself, because now you've now gotten to the point where everybody now knows where you are. We now know this can't change, but guess what? I'm going to focus on the things that you do that is so right. I'm going to stick to that. And then I'm going to commit myself to say, this is where the journey goes. And at that point in time, what then happens is that because you've gone past the struggle, she has taken a part of you. She's beginning to do some things you do well. You're beginning to do some things she does. And you find out that at that stage, by the time you're coming to commit yourself, you're at that stage where you're saying to yourself, I think we can coast from it. I think we can do well. And from that point onwards, what then happens is that you now get to the stage where the honeymoon returns, and then you guys co-create what you want to co-create with yourself, with your children, your children's children, and build a legacy. And that's why most times you see older couples, you see how beautiful. Trust me, they've gone through the scars, they've gone through the wounds, but the transformation of what you're seeing at the end of the day is simply because they stuck through it. Marriage, I always say, at the end of the day, in God's eyes, is different from what we say. Marriage was designed by God to make you holy, to make you holy, to make you holy. And there's a transformation of removing impurities, meaning that you're not always going to be perfect. You're always going to have your here and there. And there's no, yours is high and yours is low, or yours is more than the other. What is important is that are you willing to be able to live together to be able to fulfill God's desire and God's divine plan for both? I think this is the point where I drop the mic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, that was awesome. Well, first, you all need to believe my story, because that's what happened. So I wish my friend who gave him the number was here, but yeah, one day I'm going to bring her in, and so that she can actually say what happened. Yeah.
How many years? How many years after? Like, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, we have to make the point clear. Okay. All right. So thank you once again. Hope we're all blessed by Petey's sharing. I don't know if anyone has any questions to ask. If there is any, if you can just signify by either, raising your hands in the chat. I think that will work, right, Mfon? There are any questions?
Yes,
and
that's perfect.
from the
Okay,
chat.
I see Pearl's 360 design has her hand up.
Okay.
You can
Okay,
so you can unmute yourself. Are you able to unmute? Pearl? Please let me know. you can drop a message. You're not able to
Not
unmute.
able
Okay,
to.
so let me give
So
you.
we type.
Okay.
Yeah, she can type.
Okay, so try to unmute now.
Okay, got it.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. I do have a question. So I hear you when you say you die into flesh for your family. And I do understand that's also biblical. What is required from the woman? Because I've seen situations where the man is dying to flesh and the woman is just chilling. So what's her responsibility in that regard?
Okay, thank you for that question. So I guess I will have to answer that question, not my husband. That's a really fantastic question. So there's a role we're all meant to play. There's a role the husband is expected to play, which he's actually reeled out. And if you remember, when we started this session, I mentioned the fact that what the Lord said in the scripture is what we're meant to follow. And so he's meant to love, do all the bits and pieces that he's already mentioned. However, from the woman, what are you supposed to do? You're meant to. That word, being submissive, it's over the years has been abused, has been misunderstood, misconstrued. However, that's your role as a woman. You're not just meant to chill, like you said. You're meant to actually then reciprocate with, loving back is the first thing I would say. And if you're loving someone back, then because the person has their pros and cons, right? You would have to love that too, and try and work hand in hand with the man to ensure that the marriage is really what the Lord says, a loving, peaceful environment for each other and then for your children as a whole. I hope that answers the question.
Let me just add to that. I think it's a very good question. I think the first thing that I also want you to remember, I said, the Lord says I needed to model a lifestyle. In other words, I needed to lead by example, which means He's expected that as I'm leading, that the person follows to lead. Because if we look at it in the context of Christ, right? What did Christ do? He loved. The moment you and I realize the authenticity of His love, no one asked you, no one forced you to submit. You see, a woman must believe the love that the man gives. A woman must believe that love. And I must give this to women. A woman who truly knows what love is does not struggle with submission. Okay? Doesn't struggle with submission. And we also must have at the back of our mind as well that marriage in itself, as we know it, wasn't initiated by men. It wasn't initiated by men. It's a God thing. So trying to do marriage without God, you understand, is an error because you don't have what it takes as a human being to be able to carry out certain things in terms of expectations when it comes to how you relate to your spouse. There's something that happens to us when we come into the realization of the love of Jesus that makes us surrender ourselves and says we want to submit ourselves to live and die for Him. But in marriage, a woman who does not, yield herself, right, in itself is an act of rebellion. But before we start to judge her, we have to also ensure that we understand the basis to which this is happening. Because if a man's love, it's authenticity. If love is true and is open and it's pure, trust me, no one can fault it. But when you're not sure of it, right, you tend to want to defend your space. I think that's where it is. And love is what really makes a man, lay down his life. Love is what made Jesus lay down his life. So it's not a feeling, it's not an emotion. It's a knowing how deeply you feel towards someone and you're willing to be able to do what would please that individual going forward. So yes, in marriage you have quite a number of people, but today we find out that there's so many things. People have traumatic experiences in childhood. They've submitted to someone before. They've had very nasty experiences. So they're triggers. I'm sure that when a woman finds love, true love, no one tells her to submit. She submits.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the answer to that question. Peace, I hope that was a good enough answer for your question. Peace, we would like to get your feedback. Is Peace still on the call? Okay, so if there's anyone else who has a question. Okay, seems Peace is no longer on the call. Okay, Peace. Pearl, excuse me, Pearls. I called her Peace. Excuse me, Pearls. I was referring to you, Pearls. Yes, so did that answer your question? Okay.
She responded?
I'm not sure. I haven't gotten. Oh, she's muted. Oh, okay, but you could respond in the chat though.
Can you unmute her? So
Yes, that's what I'm doing. Okay, so you can unmute now.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you so much. One more question. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So are you saying a man has to love the woman he chooses to die to, or he has to follow the principles of God in love? So it seems a little to me very conditional, like, okay, I have to love you to want to die to self for you. Or is the man like saying, I have to die to you because I'm doing this out of obedience?
So yeah, I mean this is good, but the first thing is what even makes a man want to marry a woman? Why of all the women in the world you've chosen to marry this particular person? There must be some level of emotions that you have to, that you've decided you want to go this far. I think let's start with that. That I have decided that I want to live the rest of my life with this person, which means that the feelings I have, the emotions I have towards this individual is different from the others, or it's different from any, and I want to be able to spend my time with this. Now that is the beginning. And if that's a decision I've made, then what it means is that the onus is on me to follow through, to love her the way it should be, which is, do what, because love, and I'll say this to many of you. I think I mentioned, when you look at the different stages of love, when you get to the fourth stage of marriage, that fourth stage of marriage, that's when real love kicks in. That's when the authentic love, because you see, that love has been, it has been sieved, it has gone through the test, it has gone through, and then you guys have come out of it. That's when the real love, unconditional. So it's no longer about whether the person says this or person behaves. You've accepted that person and decided that I'm going to do life with you. You've chosen to focus on that which is good in that person, and that which, and it's interesting how it takes us a while to get there. But if you look at Jesus Christ, one of the things that he taught us is when he looks at you, he never sees you're wrong. He sees you're good. He always affirms you're good. The more he affirms you're good, the more you want to do good, right? And then guess what happens? You start increasing, you start developing, doing more good, right, than not doing good. Jesus affirms the good. His eyes only sees good. He doesn't evil. He doesn't behold. But our problem is the first thing when you look at your spouse is that you don't say the good things they do, is the bad things you say right first. And I don't know why we're wired like that, especially in Africa, that every time something comes before, it is a negative thing that comes to us first. If someone has an accident, the first thing an African will say is, who died? Why do you want to know who died? Why don't you ask, how many people made it? So we're wired in that particular manner. So to your question, it's just that you understand from a man's perspective that it is a duty. Once you take that covenant, the covenant says, and I always say this, but I think when we're counseling people, the first thing we always say to them is, I want you to read the marital vows I want you to think about it for a week. I want you to really think about it. When you say for better, for worse, right? You've gone into a vow. This has nothing to do with love anymore. You've decided that I am going to love this person for better, for worse. And always ask them, do you know what worse means? You're about to enter into covenant. Do you know what worse? Worse means that the person could be abusive. The person could be unfaithful. The person could have a child had a workload. The person, these are the worst things that could possibly happen. And then more. But look at the person you're looking at now. If all of these things happen, would you be able to live with this person? Do you love him enough to live with them? That's when you tell the difference that emotional love is where we sometimes say to ourselves, there's certain things we can't take. But the sacrificial love of God does not hold those things. It's that you find a way to wither through whatever it is that you're going through. You know, yeah, that would be my take on it. The onus is on you to be able to live that life, because once you take those vows, then you have to.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so, so much. So as you were speaking, you mentioned the fourth stage of marriage, right? So which means there's a first, second, third. I know you have mentioned the first stage, which is the honeymoon stage, and you mentioned the fourth stage. So could you just like take us through what those stages are? Like mention them. So from the honeymoon stage, what happens next? Yeah.
So from the honeymoon stage, I mean that's where you have all of the, you at that stage you avoid the challenges. There is that you avoid having difficult conversations. You holding your tongue when you should be establishing a gentle boundary. This might be an effort to prolong the feel good feeling. So you don't want to rock anything. That's So you guys are treating yourself really nice and very well. And this usually lasts from anywhere from a few months to 2 years. And then you have that reality stage of a marriage. And this is where communication breaks down. You feel misunderstood. You begin to notice the habits and patterns that used to seem endearing now make you frustrated beyond relief. The mismatched expectations is what you start seeing at this stage. Emotional turmoil is going on. The phase is quite mutable. It can emerge anywhere from maybe 1 year, and to 5, and sometimes last a couple of years, depending on the couple, depending on the life stressors and how they communicate. And then the third stage is the power struggle stage.
Yes, the third stage. Yes.
Is a power struggle stage.
The third one.
The third one, yeah.
I think she's trying to note that.
Yeah, the third one is the power struggle stage. The power struggle stage is when the idealism of early love crashes into the reality of two complex human beings trying to build a life, together. And it's marked by deeper disagreements, emotional vulnerability, and they need to reestablish personal identities within the relationship. So you have control dynamics, you have feeling stuff, you have resentments, you have, all of these things are things that, and these could last many years, many, many years. Again, it all depends on how the couple wants to handle it. And then the fourth stage is the stability stage. After weathering the storm, you might find a new kind of peace and stability. It's not the breathless highs of new love, but instead it's steadier, it's slower, it's rooted in respect. You've started to accept each other's flaws. You don't agree on everything, but you've gone, you've got some solid conflict tools now at that particular stage of your life. You should common challenges around this stage, drifting apart, intimacy rocks, routine fatigue, emotional complacency. All of those things are things you find. Then you go to the fifth stage, which is the commitment stage. And it's not about rings, it's not about paperwork, it's about choosing each other daily, clarity. You move through the fantasies and the fears and settle into something that feels more real. There's space for individuality and togetherness. You're a team, not in theory, but in true practice. You now work together, you do things together. So the typical challenges at this stage is external stressors, aging parents, questioning whether life should feel more exciting. You're in that stage, and ideally, of course, it becomes a long-term phase. It can be disrupted by unexpected life events or changes in personal identity. This is what typically will go wrong. And then you get to that point where we call the co-creation or legacy stage. And that's where, if you focus on shared memory, you see, maybe it's mentoring, maybe it's parenting, maybe it's community work, but all of the things of life, you at this point in time, you're sharing and trying to say how you can pass that on, to your children, to the people around you, to your community, to your society. You want to give back, and common challenges you have around this are things like loss, health issues, navigating transitions, like retirement or becoming, just that empty net when your children leave, how you begin to rearrange yourself in this area. But this is that stage where all of you just enjoy to the end, and you meet each other again in paradise. Yeah.
We only have 20 minutes left.
Beautiful.
Quite a number of questions.
Yeah.
Yes, so we have 3 quite weighty questions sitting in the chat. So let's do our best to take them as quickly as possible. So the first question from Shubila, I hope I did not spoil your name. So it's, what are some key topics, questions, or subjects you would walk couples through in premarital counseling? That's the first question. So I want to read all the questions out because it's possible that some of the answers may intertwine, right? So the second question is from Tobena, and he says, what advice will you give a young couple who are currently going through the reality stage right now? Then the final one, which is quite long, but yes, I would just like to put, okay, so this is from Tolu, and it says, can you please unpack some more of the for better, for worse phrase, because some spouses are abused into death because of the understanding of the phrase. While love may cover a lot of faults, should a spouse love through such problems that does not look to be fixable, like a narcissistic, abusive spouse? So if you would like me to take the questions again, should I take it? Which one do you want to start with? Because you can choose to start from anywhere.
Okay, so let's even start with the subject of the first question that talks about
premarital counseling. Yes. Topics, questions.
Yeah, I think premarital counseling. I think what is important here is communication, right? I think it's very critical at this stage of premarital counseling that you guys communicate your true feelings. I said honeymoons, you hold back, set your boundaries, set it, discuss those things very early. Just let each other know where you are. The earlier because that says a lot. That says a lot of confidence. Because there's so many assumptions. At times we just don't want to rock the boat, but you still end up rocking the boat. You still end up rocking the boat. So it's important that communication is and discuss everything. Discuss finances. Discuss. I always say this, that what is important is that a couple must determine. You have to build a culture. Your family must have its own culture. Not just build that culture that both of you have decided that these are the things we want to do. This is how we want to do them, because that's exactly what your children will follow through. That's the culture that's the same thing that they're going to be able to hold on. And that's what helps them when they're saying, oh, but my friend's parents, and they do this in their house. You say, well, that's not our culture. Our culture is different. And so that gives them an opportunity to understand that, okay, we can't do this. So I would say communication is very critical in the marital stage. And yeah, just being able to be open and be transparent. I was saying earlier that the generation that we have now, from our generation, I think before our parents were very open, very open. Our generation, I think we got to a point where we had there's a layer over, and then from this generation now we have 6 layers of personality. So you truly don't know. You actually think you know people today. You don't know them. You just keep taking out layers and layers and layers and layers, and you find the real person. And marriage is what brings out that real person at the end of the day. So that's number one. That's important. Now, what advice would you give a young couple who's currently going through the reality stage right now? The reality stage is a storm, like every other storm that you must, you must do away. You must be able to, and it's a posture of humility. Both of you must be humble. But I always say this: the responsibility first starts with the man. The man must learn how to die to self. If he can do that, he saves himself. He saves himself. That's true. You know, there's a place for a woman, but a man, because that's how Jesus Christ did it. He laid down. You have to die first. So it's you as a man making sure that you know how to. When you're struggling, you know, I always say this. You know, people have premarital counseling, and then I always say that have counseling even during the marriage. See counselors during the marriage so that you do not have post. Because there's some things you just don't understand. Both of you won't understand, but you need a neutral body that can help you, can talk you through, you know, this thing. So I always say, don't see a counselor when you have a problem. You understand? See a counselor so you do not have a problem. You know, and so that's what I'd say. That, you know, people who would help them in how, you know, yeah. As someone who's unbiased, typically I don't advise that you go to your parents because they would always, no matter how their intent is, you know, towards you, but they would always be biased. So find a neutral person, you know, who can help you talk through this issue. But it's a stage that humility helps you, and that's why it says marriage is not a thing in your flesh. It's something you do, you know, by God. You as a couple in that stage, you have to pray a lot. You need prayer to help you through this, just to help your countenance, just to help, you know, help you learn how to navigate certain seasons, certain conversations at that time. Now, for better for worse. Thank you for asking this question because, you know, we found ourselves in a situation where I think one of the biggest problems, you know, is how Scripture, and I'm going to start with how Scripture, understanding of Scripture, has created problems for us. And I'll give an example. Now, the Bible says that, you know, nobody, you know, that Jesus Christ says that divorce was never the plan. It was never God's plan because it's a covenant. You're meant to stay there forever. Now, but Moses permitted it because of the hardness of the heart of the people at the time. Now, if you look at that on the surface, what it says to you on the surface is that if one party is unfaithful, you understand, it means it's good to go and divorce. Makes sense? But let's dig deeper to understand the context. Why did Moses give a law like that? In the times, the Middle Eastern world, are the most cantankerous people you can find in the world. And they're the most promiscuous people in the face of the earth. Everything that you have in that place, they are. Okay? So during the time of, in the time, during Moses' time, what they found out was that when a man was tired of his wife, right, all he needed to do by law was to find two witnesses who will say that the woman committed adultery. And nobody's questioning. Once two people can say they witness that there's adultery, guess what happens? The woman is stoned to death. And so what was happening at that time was that women were just dying. And so Moses decided the only way he could save women was to say, listen, if it is for the purpose of adultery, you claim it. You understand? Guess what? Give her a letter of divorce. What was he trying to do? Preserve the life of the woman. Okay? So the basis of that is that when a woman's life is threatened, right, divorce must be activated. That is the real reason for divorce. So this idea of going back into a home that the person is abusive is so wrong. And I think also one of the things that we also must bear in mind is we take every matter to a pastor. I'm a pastor. I take every matter, and the truth of the matter is that we're not equipped for this matter. There are things I am discovering myself as a pastor. I'm not equipped for it. So there are therapists. I work alongside therapists. There's certain matters that I won't tell a woman. If I say to a woman, your husband is abusing you at home, first thing, step out of the house, move away from home. Now, if the husband is willing to keep that wife, he has to go through 1 year of therapy. After that 1 year of therapy, we will test and see whether it's okay and give them room to be able to maybe try and see, be dating each other for the next maybe 6 months or so to see if she can see that those behavioral patterns are gone. Well, and then you can now decide whether you want to go back. So this idea of couples people being in a relationship that is abusive was what Moses addressed earlier on. They were killing his daughters, and he just said, no. No. If you want to divorce your wife, you don't need to just give her a letter of divorce. Why? If you notice, the scripture says that the woman must stay, what? Unmarried. The reason why is simply because in that time, after they have killed their wives, right, and they've gone to another woman, they found out that that woman was worse than their wife. They start regretting it, and they want their wife back, but it's already too late. She's gone. So what then happened is that when they want their wife back, she's still available to come back home. This was the reason why scripture talks about divorce. But in the context of today, what is meant to be a blessing to us, because it's not been broken down in this depth, it means that everyone just wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, guess what? I'm leaving marriage. Marriage is a covenant. You don't live through those patches. You deal with it. It makes you a better person. There's no person who is perfect. Nobody goes into marriage perfect. We all have struggles that we're struggling with in that marriage. We would all make mistakes, right? But the idea is that we get better. We get better at the end of the day, but non-negotiable. Someone's life is at risk. Those are ground for divorce. Those are valid grounds. I hope that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I believe that final answer that you gave also covers an additional question that was dropped within the chat, where it says, what is the worst of the worst that justifies walking away? Right? Of course, so we're not coming from the standpoint of having a reason to walk away from the beginning. However, yes, there are situations where it will be necessary. So thank you so much for that, PE. Auntie Yini, and I don't know if you have a few words to share as well.
Okay. I think everything has been covered. I just would want to say thank you again for everyone who found time to join, and I pray that we've all been blessed. But I have personally been blessed by it. So we pray that we all are able to have meaningful relationships by the grace of God. Marriages, even friendships, whatever relationships that we have, my prayer is that we all are able to walk according to God's will and way. So that would be my conclusion for this session. Would love for everyone to have a wonderful Valentine's Day. If you're not married, it's not just for married couples. You have family, you have siblings, you have good friends. Please show them love tomorrow, and not just tomorrow, but every day. All right.
Thank you so much for that. So just before we log off, the final thing that we're going to do, wherever you are, if you can turn on your videos, please do. So I would allow everyone to be able to unmute so that we can do this one exercise. All we need to do is we'll unmute ourselves and we say Happy Valentine's Day. Right, so okay, so everybody can unmute themselves now, and I would count, then we would go. So please, if you're not able to turn on your video, just make sure that your audio is on. But it'll be fantastic if your video can be on, right? And just so you know, we are going to be posting it tomorrow, because I'm going to be giving love to the people that probably don't have dates tomorrow, right? So let's get ready. Are we all ready? If you're ready, let's see a thumbs up.
Yay.
Okay. Right. So I'm coming. Okay. So we
Happy
have
Valentine's.
So I will count 3, 2, 1, go, and we all chorus it together, right? So happy Valentine's Day, Jesus loves you.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Hold on, I haven't counted. So in 3, 2, 1, go.
Happy
Valentine's
Valentine's Day. God loves you.
Day. Jesus loves
you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Everyone,
Thank you for your time. appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a
Good night.
fantastic evening,
Everyone.
night, from wherever you're joining in. Bye. Till next time.
Bye. Bye.
We'll see you next time.